Hi, everybody. It's me, Scot Rose, coming to you from home. So, Sean asked us to make some videos about some topics that we nerd about personally. And my big one is Elizabeth Taylor. I am absolutely obsessed with Elizabeth Taylor. It's the one thing that I really kind of gay out on, and I'm not embarrassed by it at all. As a matter of fact, on this bookcase right here where my finger is pointing, special effects, this has books about Elizabeth Taylor. There's about 7 of them, as well as a VHS copy of the movie Cleopatra, which we will talk about, and all kinds of little Elizabeth Taylor memorabilia. So, and then also the sock monkeys here. So this is my fun room where I drink my coffee. Anyway, Elizabeth Taylor. So today I want to talk about the top 5 Elizabeth Taylor films that I think you should see so that you will fall in love with her just like I do, and then we can talk about this when coronavirus is over. So, number 5, we start with the film Giant, directed by George Stevens, starring Elizabeth Taylor, and this is actually the last film that James Dean made before he died. So, if you're interested in James Dean, definitely check this out as well. Like I said, it was his last film. But Elizabeth Taylor is actually particularly good in this movie. She seemed to have a really good working relationship with George Stevens, who made these really sprawling, epic films like they really used to do back in the day in the 50s and the 60s. And it's about oil men and the people in their lives. So the people that are coming up and trying to make all of that oil money, and the people that already have the oil money and they're trying to keep their hands on it. And then you kind of have Elizabeth Taylor in there, who, as she is in a lot of her films, is kind of the object of desire to just about every man in this film, because obviously she is literally one of the most beautiful women that has ever existed on the planet. Change my mind. You cannot. So there's a couple of really good scenes between Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean, and they have really good chemistry together. If you see or Google James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor, there's some really great photos of them on the set, and you can just really see that it seemed like they had a really loving relationship on the set of the film, and she spoke very highly of him later in life. But this is also one of the first films that Elizabeth Taylor really actually got to act in. And George Stevens gave her that opportunity. So, if you like sprawling films, if you like Texas oil men, and you like drama and family infighting, and watching the little guy try to make it big, and watching the big guy kind of losing what he already has, as well as a love triangle with beautiful Elizabeth Taylor, then I highly suggest you check out the film Giant. Number 4 on my list is a film called Suddenly Last Summer. It's based on a one-act play by Tennessee Williams, and some of my very favorite movies from the 1960s are actually based on Tennessee Williams plays. We'll talk about another one here in a second, but an extra one to look into is one called A Night at the Iguana, starring Ava Gardner. But the great thing about Suddenly Last Summer is, it's Tennessee Williams, so the dialogue is absolutely perfect. It's biting and wonderful, and there's just layers and layers and layers as far as what's going on. And it's a Southern Gothic drama, so it's really melodramatic in a fun way. And this movie is absolutely insane. So it stars Elizabeth Taylor, Katharine Hepburn, and Montgomery Clift, also one of the most beautiful men that has ever existed. Can't change my mind on that either. And Elizabeth Taylor in this movie is adamant that Elizabeth Taylor have a lobotomy. She has put her into a mental institution, and Montgomery Clift is the psychiatrist that is treating her and is expected to make sure that she gets this lobotomy. So kind of the point of this whole film is Elizabeth Taylor basically saying, I'm not crazy. And Katharine Hepburn basically saying, yes, she's crazy, give her the lobotomy, give her the lobotomy now, which is kind of insane. And so the majority of this film is trying to figure out why exactly it is Katharine Hepburn is so adamant on making sure that Elizabeth Taylor has a lobotomy and obviously then can't really function as a human being. And you finally, at the end of the film, figure out why it is that Katharine Hepburn wants Elizabeth Taylor to have a lobotomy. I don't want to ruin it, and I don't want to give you a spoiler, but I will just say this is in the 1960s, so they couldn't really talk about a lot of things or call things out. But there's some homosexuality in this movie, and there's some cannibalism. And that's all I'll say for the end of this film as far as the lobotomy goes. But if you want to watch a crazy, wild movie and go, I cannot believe they made this in the 1960s, definitely check this out. And then you get to watch Elizabeth Taylor have like some really pent up, frustrated freakouts, and then also kind of a really sweet love affair-ish between she and Montgomery Clift. They were actually really, really good friends in real life, and Elizabeth Taylor actually saved his life at one point. And I may talk about that on a different video. But for extra melodrama, check out Suddenly Last Summer, which brings me to number 3, a film called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which is also based on a Tennessee Williams play. So again, it's a little on the extra side. It's Southern Gothic melodrama. The dialogue, again, is absolutely wonderful. This movie, again, obviously stars Elizabeth Taylor. And if you've ever seen a photograph of Elizabeth Taylor in kind of like a white negligee and she's laying on a bed that has the gold iron headboard and footboard, that is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. This movie also is kind of crazy. There's also a gay undertone. It's Tennessee Williams, so this is not a surprise. But obviously, it's very much a Tennessee Williams-based play, so it's bringing this entire family together under one roof. Everybody's trying to get Big Daddy's money because they're pretty sure he's dying. And they're all kind of fighting with each other, and there's like this crazy white trash, really Southern part of the family. And then you've got Elizabeth Taylor that just doesn't understand why her husband doesn't want to touch her and be intimate with her, and she is a cat on a hot tin roof. Maggie the cat is just trying to get her groove on, I guess. And again, it's trying to figure out why it is her husband just won't give in to her or her feminine wiles. And you get to see her walk around a lot in a negligee and be really very sexy, which Elizabeth Taylor was very sexy. Not only was she beautiful, but nowadays would be probably, unfortunately or sadly, considered overweight because she was very curvaceous, and very much had an hourglass figure. And so again, check this one out if you like some Southern melodrama, and you want to watch Elizabeth Taylor really kind of exude sex pot status and smoldering temptress. So check that out. Then we have number 2, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? This is probably Elizabeth Taylor's best performance. This is a film based on an Edward Albee play, directed by Mike Nichols, and also starring one of Elizabeth Taylor's husbands, Richard Burton. So Elizabeth Taylor started really trying to make higher quality films in the later 60s, because Elizabeth Taylor really was, Richard Burton really was pushing her to have better quality, and he was a theater actor, so she really tried to do that. Elizabeth Taylor gained weight for this film. She didn't wear any makeup. She was in bad lighting to try to look older. I believe she was only in her mid-30s when she made this film, and the character is much, much older. But you get to watch her actually act, really for the first time, let go and let loose and really create a character. And it's just these knockdown, drag-out fights, verbal spats between she and Richard Burton. And there's a really sad kind of side story, which is why they're fighting with each other about losing a child. But if you want to see Elizabeth Taylor and you want to see a great actress, watch this film. She's absolutely amazing as an older woman that's also still really trying to get hers, with a drink in hand, and gives it back to her husband as well as he gives it to her. Which brings me to number 1 on my list, the greatest film of all time, Cleopatra, 1963, directed by Joseph Mankiewicz, who also directed All About Eve, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton. This is where they met each other. This is where they fell in love. This is where the modern paparazzi of celebrities was born. Elizabeth Taylor was the first person to be paid $1 million for a role, and this is where she plays Cleopatra. Probably offensive nowadays, but this movie is epic. It is probably the best epic of the 1950s and 1960s, and if anybody tells you it wasn't, they're a liar. It was the highest grossing film, non-adjusted, for a period of time. It was also the film that was the biggest flop of all time for a longest time. For how much it cost to actually make this film, for everything that went into it. And I'd probably make one video about just that, and maybe I will. But if you want to see Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, and in about 14,000 wigs and the most beautiful costumes, this is the film to watch. As a matter of fact, here is Elizabeth Taylor, Cleopatra doll. Like I said, I gay out. This is the most amazing film that has ever existed. The dialogue is amazing. The fighting scenes and war scenes are kind of bad, but if you want to see Rex Harrison and Elizabeth Taylor have some great scenes, and you want to see Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton and watch what chemistry and smoldering, hot, sexy love looks like on screen, watch the love scenes between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and you will need to be alone for a minute because they are so hot. Anyway, that's my nerd out on Elizabeth Taylor. Please check her out. She is one of the most underappreciated actresses of all time. Her personal life gets a lot of attention. Her jewelry gets a lot of attention. The work that she did for AIDS research later on in life gets good attention. But first and foremost, she is probably one of the greatest film actresses of all time, and certainly one of, if not the greatest and first biggest global celebrities of all time. I'm Scot Rose. Fall in love with Elizabeth Taylor, and let's talk about it later. Have a great day.